What's up? What's happening? Welcome in. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We got a good one for you today. It's a Vibe Check Wednesday. Obviously, our schedule a little shifted thanks to New Year's, but a Vibe Check Wednesday here on the Hoffman Show, meaning we'll take your calls coming up in about 10 minutes at 301-230-0980. You'll get Logan Paulson's take on the quarterback situation and Take Command coming up at the kind of the long-term quarterback situation. Take Command coming up at the top of the hour. Be joined by our friend Mitch Tischler later in the show as well, and it is a Wednesday, so never read the comments. And boy, it's a dark place, these comments these days. We will get to that coming up at 5:30. But we start with the top story today.
Know yet about who's going to start a quarterback?
Yes, we're going to stick with Sam.
Is it just because of what you saw, anything last Sunday, or is it because of Jacoby's situation?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both, but I thought what Sam did and went out and did things that, we were hoping he would be able to do. He did some really good things. I thought he managed a couple of drives very well, very nicely, and, again, want to see him get an opportunity to finish it out.
Sam Howell had a good first half on Sunday, and he looked composed, and he looked like the guy that he looked like earlier in the season from like a mentality standpoint. He didn't look like the shell-shocked quarterback that played and ultimately got benched multiple weeks in a row. And I think that, considering where we are in the season, is enough to justify this decision. I probably would have leaned this way in a 55-45 kind of lean. So not quite on a razor's edge, but I do think there's a lot of merit for starting Jacoby this weekend if he is healthy and ready to go. I think the injury helps push it off of the razor's edge. It's like, hey, dude, hamstrings are funky. You don't need to go out there and find out that your hamstring's not actually ready, and then you go into the offseason needing to rehab versus going into the offseason healthy. Let's just get you the offseason healthy. You're about to be a free agent. You're good, man. You go get thanks for all you've done. Jake Fromm will be the backup, and we'll go from there. But I also think that just as a younger guy, like getting him that start is good. Getting him the extra experience in a game that does not mean a whole lot is worth it. And doesn't mean a whole lot for Washington, I should say. It means nothing for Washington in terms of winning it. It means everything potentially if they lose it. But it's the right, like Sam has been your quarterback one. He didn't perform so well that you have to bench him last week. And you go from there. It doesn't change anything long-term, and I don't think him going out and throwing for 300 yards would change how I feel long-term. It just reminds you that he's capable of that, but we know he's capable of that. And, Anthony, I think that's the thing that, as I've been doing more thinking this week, is really hard to swallow. And, we come out on sports radio, and we're rewarded, if you will, for strong takes. Strong takes get attention. And I kind of hate that because I think things are often not super definitive. There are times where they are, and that's why when I'm super definitive about something, it's because I feel really strongly about it. But even yesterday, where the headline is it's time to name Sam Howell what he is, a backup, at least right now at this stage in his career, I don't think it's unreasonable to be no, you can start and win games. And I even said in the analysis yesterday, if you get beyond the headline and you listen to the entire segment and listen to me talk through it with callers and whoever, is there a world where you win 10 games with Sam Howell next year? Yeah, that world exists. It's just not the most likely outcome. And you shouldn't plan for a what if everything goes right scenario. That's how you get yourself in trouble. Potential gets people fired. So I think you have to just be realistic about the concerns that you have about him, how they've manifested, the trajectory that he's on, and also be able to acknowledge that where he is on that trajectory, where he is on that road, is not at the very beginning where you can't play. It's not at the very end where he's awesome. It's somewhere in the middle where some weeks he's going to look really good and some weeks he's going to be really bad. And most weeks he's going to be painfully average and not be good enough for you to win football games against good teams. And I think people struggle with that. People struggle with mediocrity more than they do with greatness or with terribleness because it's less definitive and it's much more gray.
Yeah, I also just think this season alone, we came into the season thinking the defense was going to, lead this team to the playoffs. And, there wasn't going to be a lot of pressure on Sam. So even if Sam did just play mediocre, or just good enough to like possibly win games, put ourselves in position to, win games, I think people would be responding differently to Sam. But, since he started the season, off really playing really good, we started 2-0 for the first time since 2011.
That's crazy.
He was putting up numbers. We're taking the Eagles to the
Which
brink
felt
of
so much better at the time than it really was. Like
exactly
him lighting up the Eagles defense felt like it was something. Turns out that's the Eagles defense.
exactly. So I just feel as though what he showed early, like I think people put him on like a higher pedestal than what he was necessarily ready for. And I just feel as though, quite frankly, I do think he needs a little bit more time, but I also think his ceiling isn't that high, if I'm being completely honest.
See, I think his ceiling is high because his arm talent is really good. Like, he makes big-time throws. He's super creative. He can throw from off platform. Like, he does a lot of stuff that says, like, wow, if he could shore up the fundamentals, it'd be great. But, like, this position, people need to realize this. Like, if you take nothing else out of our radio show today, take this with you the next 4 months as we do quarterback evaluations. The most important trait a quarterback has is decision-making. Assuming they have the prerequisite of arm strength and stuff that gets you in the conversation in the first place, right? So, like, yeah. It was funny. We were at a camp when we did James Smith-Williams camp this past summer. And Logan and I were out there, and Sam Fortier was out there writing something on it. And we were goofing off beforehand, before the camp actually started. And James was out there throwing with us too. And we were like throwing a 5-yard out. And you do it from the hash. And you realize to throw a 5-yard out in the NFL is like a 20-yard ball on a rope.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think people realize the physical talent it takes to do the most basic stuff in the NFL against air, nevertheless, with defenders. And nevertheless, once you get out of 7-on-7 defenders and like a rush coming at you and real coverages and like, but literally executing a basic throw, especially outside the numbers, is like, it's insane how talented these guys are. But assuming you have that talent, decision-making, speed, and accuracy is the most important thing you can have. And that is something where Sam Howell struggles. And I think part of that is like your decision-making process involves the intake of information. You can't make decisions if you don't have all the information. And I don't think he sees the field particularly well, especially the middle of the field. And so, like, this is something that's going to become a theme, I think, during today's show, because I anticipate having to tell this to folks on the phones, and it's certainly something that's going to come up and never read the comments later. Like, people throw out different examples of quarterbacks who were bad early or quarterbacks who came out of nowhere. And quarterbacks who were bad early, your Peyton Mannings, your Troy Aikmans, et.cetera., who really did struggle in their first years. One, they showed a positive growth trajectory, and two, people anticipated some of the problems and ultimately like figured they would work through them because they were, in Aikman and Manning's case, 1-1 overall. They were literally the first picks in the draft. Sam fell to the 5th round because of certain deficiencies. And what he's done is display those deficiencies and never really improved on them. I guess he did somewhat during the season improve the sack to pressure ratio, but his solution for that was like vacating the pocket in a way that caused other problems. He never like really learned how to just get rid of the ball faster and move within the pocket in a healthy way. So like people want to make these proclamations about certain guys and try to make the comparison instead of looking at the actual data in front of them as a defensive Sam. All I'm doing is looking at the data in front of me. And when I look at the data for like Kurt Warner or for Tom Brady or Brock Purdy, the best guys to come out of the late rounds and kind of shoot to superstardom, they were pretty successful early. Like the thing about even Dak, like were they asked to do a lot? Was Brock Purdy asked to do a lot last year? No. But they were successful in the mission. Like they won a ton of football games early in their careers. Kurt Warner and Tom Brady both sat their first years, and their second year, a.k.a. the year Sam is in now, was their, like, explosion onto the scene year. Brady won the Super Bowl. Granted, huge help from the defense, for sure, but he won the freaking Super Bowl. And Kurt Warner also won the Super Bowl. Like, 99 was Warner's second year in the league. It wasn't a 4-whatever this is about to be season, 4-13 season, assuming they lose on Sunday. So you got to have one or the other. You got to either have immediate success that disproves the deficiencies and why you were underdrafted, it turns out, or you got to be someone who says, like, or someone who everybody knows is going to be that guy, which is why you get drafted in the first round, which is why you get drafted 1-1 overall. It's not like draft status is handed out at random. You get drafted where you're drafted because you're good and scouts see a trajectory for you. And so when you go out as a fifth rounder, even if you were slightly underdrafted, maybe Sam should have been a third. Let's say he's a third rounder, and you go out and it's like, oh, that's all the reasons that guy's a third rounder, and you prove them right. No, you're not going to get more chances in the league. And ultimately, that's why a lot of third rounders wind up being backups. And there's nothing wrong with that. He's going to have a great career. But that great career is likely not going to be as a Super Bowl or perennial Super Bowl contending starting quarterback. And that's just the reality. And if that's not the case, then Washington should probably keep looking for that. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. It is a Vibe Check Wednesday, so let's check the vibes of the fan base. How y'all feeling, Commanders fans, going into this final game of the season? I'm sure that will be mostly quarterback-centric, but open to other topics of Commanders discussion as well. 301-230-0980. It's the Hoffman Show, taking your calls on the Ace Law listener line next. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. The Ace Law listener line is 301-230-0980. It's a Vibe Check Wednesday. All season long, we've done this on Tuesdays, but with the holiday, kind of bumped it back to Wednesday. So if you're a Wednesday listener instead of a Tuesday listener, hopefully you're an everyday listener. We're here starting at 4 o'clock each and every day, not only on the Team 980 and the free Odyssey app, but streaming live on YouTube as well at the Team 980. You get a little taste of what we do with the callers here in the 4 o'clock hour. Let's go to that Ace Law listener line and start off with Dontel and Frederick. Dontel, thanks for calling. You are on the Hoffman Show.
Hey, thanks so much for taking my call, guys, and Happy New Year to you.
Thank you, and Happy New Year to you, too.
Dude, I'm thinking if we don't get Khalid Williams or Jaden Daniels here, it's just going to be another total catastrophe. It is so hard to get a high-profile quarterback. I mean, we haven't gotten one in over a decade with RG3, and we were somewhat good then. I mean, until he made some certain situation. In my opinion, he made his own bed, so I think that's how his career ended up, with him making some bad choices. But Khalid Williams and Jaden Daniels is what we're going to need, because my man, Sam Howell is not good. I mean, he's okay, but he's not good. Yeah. And, I mean, I think if you put Sam Howell on the 49ers, it wouldn't be that much of a fall-off, because I don't feel that Brock Purdy's that good. I mean, we don't have a Brandon Ayuk. We don't have Deebo Samuels. We don't have Kittle, Christian McCaffrey. We need to build this thing. So, and I think it starts with the high-profile quarterback.
All right, so I'm you just made two contrary points, which I think is interesting. Thanks for the call. Much appreciated. But, like, this is the conundrum that I am in and will unravel over the next 4 months, because I have not started my college stuff. I watched, obviously, some of the college football playoff the other night. I'm tangentially aware of what some of the draft analysts that do this stuff for a living think of certain quarterbacks. But at the end of the day, like, I haven't sat down and started to watch these guys yet. I'll probably start doing that in the next couple of weeks. But a lot of I tend to rely more on scouting than evaluation, if you will. When I go to the combine, for instance, if I go again this year, you start talking to people and you get some of the background of, like, the kid's makeup and a lot of that kind of stuff. And, I think because of the nature of Washington's pick this year, like, spending some time watching the quarterbacks is going to be worth it. But I also don't pretend to be a professional scout. So there's that as well. But on a larger point, like, you say two things there. You talk about San Francisco and Brock Purdy and how you don't think he's that good. One, I think Brock Purdy may have not started out that good last year, but Brock Purdy does a lot to elevate that offense. They don't ask him to do it very often, but when he is called upon, he is ready. And that is because they have created a system schematically and an ecosystem in terms of players around him that allows a quarterback of Brock Purdy's caliber and Brock Purdy's specific skill set to succeed. That dude is super duper smart, and he's really accurate, and he's a great decision maker. And so, yeah, I think they can win a Super Bowl pretty easily. Not pretty easily, but, like, they can win a Super Bowl with Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy's not going to hold them back. He can make the plays that are necessary to win. And that's something that probably a year ago wasn't true. Like, he's been allowed to incubate, to use a term that I've used a lot in the last month or so with Sam, where I think the Commanders failed Sam this season. I don't think Sam is as good at some of the very specific things that Brock Purdy is good at, and I do think there would be a drop-off if he was in San Francisco. But I also think Kyle, if Sam was his quarterback, would have built it differently. So there's that too. The point I think that's most important here, though, is you can't be like, what we need is all these other players, which is why we need to take the great quarterback. You pretty much only get one. You got to pick a path. Are we going to be elite at everything else? Are we going to build a great defense with great skill positions and very essentially a great offensive line? Or are you going to have a great quarterback that covers up for deficiencies elsewhere? Are you going to draft Joe Burrow and your offensive line, being one of the worst in the league, gets covered up because Joe Burrow's that damn good? Are you going to have an average-ish offensive line in places and, skill position players that are not as good anywhere else in Kansas City? And a defense that for part of this run was more middle of the pack than what it is now? And have Patrick Mahomes? Are you going to have, Brady cover up for mediocre a lot of stuff in New England over time, like very good defense, and then, Brady made the offense work. Like, you got to have a plan, a vision. By the way, I heard this the other day, which is nuts. You want to know how good Tom Brady is at covering up for stuff? The New England Patriots have not re-signed to a second contract a draft pick that Bill Belichick has selected since 2013. They literally have gone an entire decade without re-signing a draft pick to a second contract in the first 3 rounds. They won multiple Super Bowls in that realm because Tom Brady's that good and Bill Belichick as a defensive coach is that good. So you can have a quarterback that covers it up, and if you get Caleb Williams, or if Jaden Daniels is that guy, or if Drake May is that guy, or if Michael Penix or J.J. McCarthy or Bo Nix is that guy, great. That's the shortcut. The fastest path to do it is to get that right. It's also extremely difficult. And in some ways, it's easier, even though it's the long way around, to take Olu Fashanu, the tackle out of Penn State, a stud edge rusher with the 35th pick, the second pick in the second round, and then another stud whatever, maybe a Keon Coleman out of Florida State, big wide receiver, ex-wide receiver with your 40 whatever pick that you get from the Bears. Or you trade down and you try to target a tackle and Brock Bowers, the tight end out of Georgia. And like you just build it up with studs all over the place and get by with a Sam Howell caliber, or even, you try to trade back and get a late first and a late top 10 pick if that's feasible. And you get Penix or Nix at the end of the first round or the start of the second. And, your whatever's in the first round. And you draft a guy that has a longer window and longer runway than Sam Howell contractually and build up the roster around him. I think that's a feasible play as well. But with Howell, you run into a couple of issues, mainly that if you're going to take 2-3 years to build up the roster because you need a couple years worth of studs, even if Sam is good the next couple of years and he winds up just being a bridge guy, you got to pay him in 2 years. Like, this is the downside of a 5th round quarterback, is the contract is 4 years, not 5, compared to a first rounder. And when he sits for a year, and then the first year is this mixed bag of whatever, and your third year is a bridge year, all of a sudden you're staring down paying the guy if all of a sudden he flourishes in year 4, and we call that a Daniel Jones special, even though Jones did it in the 5th year instead of the 4th. But he flourishes in the final year, and you're like, do we pay him? Or do we move on? Like, this is the conundrum you find yourself in. So it's not straightforward. It's not easy. And I think that actually highlights, unintentionally, that caller just highlighted the very, promising, because there are multiple paths you could go down, and depending on what you think of these quarterbacks, if Jaden Daniels is your guy, then sick. Take him. Go for it. I by no means am going to push back on that. But you just better think he's your guy. Because you're not, hopefully, then going to get a chance to draft that much higher, that much longer. Because you're going to be, good and win football games. 301-230-0980. I know that was just one call that I reacted in a long time to. We came into that segment a little bit late as well. So I promise to blitz through many more calls much faster next. It's a Vibe Check Wednesday on the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Taking your calls on the Ace Law listener line at 301-230-0980. If you're in a wreck, Ace Law helps you get a check. Call 8888 Ace Law. Again, that's 8888 Ace Law. Let's go back to that Ace Law listener line and keep it going on our Vibe Check Wednesday with JT. JT, thanks for calling. You are on the Hoffman Show.
Hey, what's going on, fellas? And Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you as well.
Thanks for taking the call.
Yeah, you got it.
Hey, I appreciate that. And as far as the vibe, my vibe, and I hate that my vibe is excited, but it's to be transparent, that's exactly where it's at. And that we have sucked so bad that we're in a good position and we're in a position to change. Where there's excitement around, who will be able to select as a GM, who will be able to get as a coach. And then ultimately, because I feel those are the most important decisions that have to be made this winter. And then what's going to happen in free agency. And then ultimately, who we're going to draft. And one of the questions that I did have, because I know obviously everyone saw Penix play the other night, and I know he's coming off, 2 ACLs. What's your thoughts on him? Because obviously I think, everybody wants Caleb. I'm not sure what the Bears going to do. It looks as if they'll take Marvin or trade out of the pick. So I don't know. I'm not sure, what if Caleb will even be available. I haven't been overly impressed with Drake May from the stuff that I've seen. I'm Caleb would be my one, and then Jaden Daniels, and then I would go with Penix. But what's your thoughts on Penix? And like I said, the vibe is I'm excited for all the change.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the call. Thank you. And I'm honestly excited too. Like, I have been saying for months on this show and on Take Command, like, we're just going to have to survive the next couple of weeks, but this is an exciting time. Like, there's going to be the changes that have long been needed to happen. And unlike in previous years where you hope to get someone and hope it works out and you kind of have to take flyers, like, I think the Commanders could be the top job on the market, depending on what you like. Like, if you want an established quarterback, you're going to go to Los Angeles and you're going to take Justin Herbert, and you're going to be very happy with that decision. But if you want flexibility, if you want the ability to build something, and you want to be incredibly well resourced with who we think is a great owner in Josh Harris, based off what he's given his other organizations to work with, the Devils have rebuilt very well. The Sixers are competitive year in and year out. Even if they haven't won the big one yet, I realize that. But again, 50 wins for 6 straight years is one of the best runs in the last decade of the NBA. And he has given his teams the resources to compete year in and year out. They just haven't always come through. And that's all you can ask for out of your ownership is, do you have the resources to compete? And I do think because of that, the Commanders are going to be a top destination for GMs and for coaches and for players for the first time in a long time. As specifically for Penix, again, I haven't watched a ton of these guys. The ACL stuff doesn't necessarily concern me a ton. I'd certainly have my questions about his rehab and stuff and kind of where he's at now. I want my strength and conditioning staff to be able to look at some of the metrics and the numbers around that. My doctors to understand the surgeries and how he recovered and all of that kind of stuff. The question I really have for Penix is, and it's one that we actually talked about on yesterday's edition of Take 5, the quick off-day edition, if you will, of Take Command, where we don't do a full 45-minute podcast, but we just do like a 5-10-minute conversation, is his age. Like, he is in his 6th year doing this. He is 23 years old. And it's not so much that he's old and like, oh my God, like he's going to retire before we ever get the money's worth out of him. Because quarterbacks that are good play into their mid-30s at this point, if not late 30s. But it's, were you a guy that was dominant when you were younger, or you just get really good at college football because you're 23 years old now, beating up on 19-year-olds? He's a guy that's had multiple consistent years, and he's shown a good growth trajectory. And from what I understand about him as a QB, like I'm somewhat interested in him. He has a quick release. Obviously, he's very accurate. He's not afraid to throw the ball down the field. We saw that in the semifinal the other night. I think there's a lot to like there. He's not like a super mobile guy like a Jaden Daniels, obviously. Caleb seems to be the guy that everyone agrees upon is special. The opinions on May are all over the place. Nix is, I think, another interesting guy. And the one guy that I kind of hope he goes back to school is J.J. McCarthy. He just seems he's super young. He doesn't seem like he's built for the NFL yet. But he might be a top 10 pick. So he might, and if Harbaugh leaves, especially, like, why would you go back to Michigan at that point? Just come out and to be the high draft pick and hope you go to a place that is willing to have some patience with you. So I think the question you have to ask is, like, if you were staring at a quarterback who's a gigantic flyer, and let's say Daniels is that guy, or May, like either one, you don't get Caleb Williams, the guy that you're sure about, because New England, Robert Kraft is hell-bent on starting the new administration in New England post-Bill Belichick with a number one guy who his new coach is in love with. And he trades an RG3 style, whatever, with the Bears to trade up to number one. And Washington's like, we're not paying that. That's ridiculous. Good, prudent decision, right? Let's say that happens. If that happens and you're staring at Marvin Harrison, who's the best receiver prospect in a decade, Fashanu, very, very good left tackle prospect, or two quarterbacks you take a flyer on, do you take the surer thing, the receiver or the tackle, and then try to trade back into the back end of the first round for a guy like Penix? And I think if you ultimately tier out these QBs and you don't think there's a lot of separation between May, Daniels, Penix, Nix, McCarthy, then that would be my plan. I would try to package those 2 early seconds for a late first. If I have to give up a future second to do it, then fine. But that's how I would approach it and make sure that I get someone, but it doesn't have to be at the second, third, fourth pick, whatever they wind up with. If you don't think there's that much difference and you think that there is a huge difference in the quality of the other player that you can get. Back to the calls we go on that Ace Law listener line. Let's go to Randy. Randy, thanks for calling. You are on the Hoffman Show.
How you doing? Appreciate the time.
Of course.
I just have to say that I have to disagree with you and the last caller. I'm not taking a quarterback unless his name is Bo Nix, and he's in the second or third round. I don't believe in Khalid, and I don't believe in the other guy.
Can I take a timeout? Why are people all of a sudden calling him Khalid Williams? Anthony, did I miss a memo? It's Caleb Williams.
No. Caleb, that's my fault.
Okay,
No
you're the second person that did it. And I just wanted to make sure, because sometimes guys are like, hey, now that I'm going to be a professional, my name is said this way. So I'm just making sure I didn't miss something. I wasn't trying to be rude, I promise.
No, you didn't miss nothing.
Okay.
We are human. We pronounce
no, all right. All good. Continue.
We make mistakes. I wouldn't take a quarterback there. If someone wants to grab a quarterback up top, I would trade back. See, the problem is Sam was forced to pass about 80% of the time. He didn't have no run game, and he only had 16 starts. He's basically like a rookie. And what bothers me is that in the beginning of the season, Sam, he has potential. He's good, and he falls off later on in the season. Now he sucks. That's funny. The problem with this town, is they don't have any patience with their quarterbacks. That's why we suck. A fair evaluation would be to get the guy another year. And people overlook the fact that our defense sucked all year. They was giving up bombs after bombs. The defense was the problem, and Coach Rivera was the problem. To get a fair evaluation, Sam needs another year, need to build the O-line up, get as many picks as we can, and build our team. And that's my feel on it.
All right. Thanks for the call, Randy. Here's the problem with Randy's point. Sam is what the people who ultimately let him fall to the 5th round thought he was. Maybe he's a little bit better than that. Maybe he should have been a 3rd rounder, let's say. But the difference between other guys who get chances and Sam Howell, who, by the way, has not had 16 starts. He's got 17 going on 18, and he's not a rookie. He is a second-year player, which from like an experience and like if he was growing standpoint, I've been someone who said like he's basically a rookie. But now that it's getting down to decision time on how you plan your future, I cannot state this more clearly than this. Time starts working against Sam Howell now because he's not a rookie. He will be in his 3rd year. He is on a 4-year rookie deal. The whole appeal of Sam Howell is not that he's going to be the best quarterback in the league. The appeal of Sam Howell was and remains he could be pretty good, which is possible. I would say probably not likely that he's gives you a great shot to win every single week, can cut the turnovers, cut the sacks, be more deliberate with the football, be on time, all the stuff that people were concerned that he couldn't do, and then he proved them right. That you get through all of that, and then at the end of next year, you're like, yeah, we got our guy. Well, then guess what? You're in the final year of his rookie deal. And then you got to pay him. So if Sam was worth the flyer, because if he turned out to be great now, and like next year, you're like, hey, if we can surround this guy with some stuff, we're in the Super Bowl next year, versus like, hey, we need another year to find out. The contract is no longer playing in his favor. And people just seem to want to ignore that. And you can't. You just can't. That's not how the time-space continuum works. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We've got a couple more calls on deck. We've got some lines open as well if you'd like to call us at 301-230-0980 to that Ace Law listener line next on the Hoffman Show. But first, a look at what's trending.
Here's what's trending.
Why was Logan Paulson ready to say definitively for the first time all year, like Sam Howell, not the guy that the Commanders should be relying on in 2024? You'll hear his explanation why coming up at the top of the hour. Hoffman Show here on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app and streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. Vibe check time here in the first hour of the show today, a.k.a. we're taking your calls on the Ace Law listener line at 301-230-0980. Yet another reminder, very important, that if you are in a wreck, Ace Law helps you get a check. You call 8888 Ace Law. Let's go to our guy, Lap. Lap, thanks for calling. Thanks for holding. You are on the Hoffman Show. Happy New Year, bro. Lap. Okay, let's skip Lap. Lap, I don't know, maybe fell asleep. Maybe, I don't know, maybe the mute button was on. Whatever happened. Let's go to Zell in Hyattsville. Zell, thanks for calling. You are on the Hoffman Show.
How you doing, Mr. Hoffman?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Pretty good, not too bad. I listen to all these people talking, and, you know, I hear their viewpoints and their stuff, and I say to myself, go get Caleb Williams. Just go get him. He can make all the throws. He's got NFL body type, and stop playing around. I mean, Jalen Daniels is good, and he's like a Lamar Jackson, but you know, you want somebody here that can quarterback. I mean, can make all the plays and do all the different things. And everybody talked about his lack of commitment and all this other stuff, and basically. Some people don't even have the facts about the man. I mean, they don't even go and ask him, you know, ask his coaches how he does and people that play around him. So stop. I mean, people need to stop messing around with these quarterbacks. I mean, take the guy who's NFL ready, who's got an NFL body. Come on. That's all I'm saying.
Thanks for the call, Zell. Look, if Caleb Williams is really that dude, then, yeah, you need to go get him. I'm fascinated to see about the draft process tearing him apart. And tearing him apart, you might find that he's a really good quarterback. Like, everyone gets super scrutinized, and eventually you might just go like, yeah, we've done the scrutiny, and he's awesome. There's a reason that he was as hyped as he was. But the idea that he's got, like, an NFL body, like, he's 6'1", 215. Like, his official USC bio is, like, 6'1", 215. Sam Howell's not that different size-wise, at least listed. Sam's probably more like 5'11". But, like, it's not like he's Peyton Manning. He's not 6'6", 230. So, I mean, he's not Trevor Lawrence, 6'5", 6'6", or maybe Lawrence is 6'4". Point is, like, he's not massive, but he can make all the throws. He's won a lot of games at Oklahoma. Obviously, USC didn't go quite as well. And he does have a big personality. Like, you know, he's doing some of the GQ stuff, and, like, I don't have a problem with that. And some old school evaluator football knuckleheads will, and, like, that's fine. He's an eccentric personality with some of the stuff that he puts out there. But, like, I have no problem with that. And I do think the point that Zell made is most correct, is, like, I care most about what his teammates think. I care most about what his coaches think. I care about his work ethic. I care how much football matters to him if I'm going to draft him 1-1 overall. It doesn't have to be the end-all, be-all. You know, I think Nikola Jokic is changing people's minds on how important the sport has to be to someone in terms of the grand scheme of their life, but it better be important to you as your job and your profession. It's not like Jokic doesn't work. He's just like, hey, man, like, I play basketball. It doesn't need to be the end-all, be-all for my life. I hope I get remembered as a dad, not as a basketball player. So can that apply to football? To an extent, yeah. But, like, also, you know, quarterback is so intensive in terms of the studying you have to do. It does need to be kind of outsized importance if you're going to succeed. I care about whether Caleb Williams feels that way and has that kind of work ethic and dedication and understanding. Does he have the habits and all that kind of stuff? And if he does, and I'm only saying if because I don't do scouting, but if he does, they should try to go get him. Maybe they would get dumb lucky and the Bears would just pass. And they are so scared to trade out of one that they're not going to get the guy they want that, you know, they're like, we want Marvin Harrison. And if we trade out of one, we're not going to get him. If we trade with New England at 3, we're going to have to, and maybe you could do something like that. Like you trade up, you know, you can just screw the Bears out of at least the third pick and get Fashanu at 3 because Caleb goes 1. You trade New England trades back to 3, then trades back up to 2. I don't know. Like there's a lot of possibilities here in terms of making sure that you get the best players possible. But at the end of the day, like if Robert Kraft is willing to offer 3 future firsts to move up from 3 to 1 to get Caleb Williams, like I'm not that interested. It's too much on a roster that needs too much. So it's going to be a long 4 months. Let's go to Mark in Greenbelt. Mark, thanks for calling. You're on the Hoffman Show. Mark.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. Well, I was listening a little bit about what you were saying about the quarterback situation, and as far as with Sam Howell, I think I know you were saying basically he's like in his second year. I mean, technically he is in his second year, but he really is a rookie, really, if you look at it, because
except for he's not. Like the problem is, Mark, is like from an experience standpoint, yes, and I agree with that in terms of his trajectory. Yeah. And he's a young second-year player, by the way. He is younger than some of the guys that we're talking about that are going to get drafted, but he's 2 years into the 4-year contract, and that matters.
Yeah, that is true. But I think it's going to – now, I would like to see them proceed with Hal, but, I'm realistic. I know anytime you have new ownership, it doesn't matter. I think I even heard somebody say, Hal could be going out there and playing great, and it's not going to matter because the ownership is going to want to put their stamp on this team. Josh Harris and Magic Johnson are going to want to put their stamp on this team, and they're going to probably want to bring their own guy in. I've been watching some tape of some of these quarterbacks, and I've been thoroughly impressed with Jaden Daniels. I've been watching some tape on him, and of course Caleb Williams he's like a magician with the ball in his hand. I mean, I've even heard some people say he's kind of does some things like Patrick Mahomes, and watching some of the things, I know.
All right, thanks for the call, Mark. Oh my God, Anthony. I love doing calls and stuff, but this can't be our next 4 months, bro.
I mean,
there's got to be something more stimulating. There's got to be something better than fans calling in with their quarterback evaluations. Maybe we could do that as a fun bit for a day. We just have Scouts Day, where everyone comes in and you break down tape, and we'll do the show down in the performance space, and we'll put a sign outside that says all NFL scouts here, and people can line up and they can give their best take. We'll put like a 2-minute timer on it, and we'll do a full 3-hour show of fans scouting quarterbacks. Yes, the guy who won the Heisman Trophy and the guy who is the unanimous, or not unanimous, but is the consensus number 1 overall pick are intriguing. Yes, 100%. The Commanders should absolutely consider them. That is not earth-shattering. That is not revelatory. It's not incorrect either. It's not that entertaining of radio. That's all I'm saying. So here's what I would like. You can tweet me at Craig Hoffman. You can threads me, reply to me on threads, at Craig_Hoffman. You can DM me on Instagram at Craig_Hoffman. You can email me, hoffmanshow.com, or just my work email is craig.hoffman@odyssey.com. What do you guys want for the next 4 months? How do we want to do this? Because we're not going to come in here every single day and just say, open phone lines. Hey, I think Jaden Dan, and this is not to pick on Mark or pick on any other caller. But we can't just be like the same 3 guys are good at college football. That's the answer. We'll do some of that as we're around the combine and we get some actual more information about these guys. But we can't This is not, we're going to do, I hope this comes off as like a hopeful thing that people are excited about and not me being a jerk. We're going to do better than that for the next 4 months until the draft. That is my promise to you, is we're going to do better than lazy, hey, let's go to Bob in Bethesda. I think Jaden Daniels is good. Okay, let's go to Jim in Annapolis. I think so-and-so is good. Okay, let's go. We're not going to do that for 4 months. That's terrible radio. My promise to you is we're not going to do it. So what do you guys want instead? That's you can tweet me, you can email me, you can send a carrier pigeon, whatever you do. Up next, Logan Paulson, his analysis of why it is time to consider all of those guys as opposed to just sticking with Sam Howell, why he's ready to definitively say that Sam Howell is not the Commander starter in 2024. Take command on a Wednesday next. Sometimes I don't know what to do with you, Anthony. It's hour 2 of the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We are streaming live on YouTube as well at the Team 980. YouTube, an important place for this show. Not only do we post our clips and highlights there, but we also take some of your comments and read them on the air, a segment we call Never Read the Comments, and that happens at 5:30 on Wednesdays. Oh, look, that's 25 minutes from right now. A good one coming up then. Right now, though, time for Take Command. Logan Paulsen is not a man who likes to be definitive. He is someone who lives in the gray area, the minutia, even more than me. I feel like the hardliner on that show sometimes because Logan likes to keep all his options open. But as we finished up our post-game pod on Sunday, he was ready to say, Sam Howell, back up. That's where he is right now. Not the guy the Commanders should be thinking about building around in 2024. So on our tape review pod, we dove into the why, and here is that conversation.
It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
Take Command podcast from Odyssey Sports. I'm Craig Hoffman. He is Logan Paulsen. Happy New Year. Happy to be back with you, breaking down some football film, Logan. Even if it is the, what number are we on? 7th straight loss for the Commanders? Yikes.
Is that it? Yeah,
so.
I mean, not great. It's getting harder and harder to watch these games in review because I think we all know that there's going to be some pretty big changes coming up. But it is always, I'm a football junkie. I can't help myself, so.
No doubt. Something that we should do on Thursday. This is always fun when we plan our future pods in the middle of the current pod, but we should take a look. Ben Standig did a really nice list of some front office folks that are on the radar, and I think talking about organizational structure and talking about some of those names is something that we can definitely try to hit on later this week. As for now, though, we do dive into the tape, and that's going to put Sam Howell in focus. But before we get specific to this game, Logan, I think it'd be good to zoom out a little bit in looking at the comments and such of our instant reaction show. It does seem that some folks, this is going to sound harsh, but some folks don't understand the time continuum. They don't understand how time works, and that as it goes, you get more data and more information, and that should change how you view things. And I will say that is something that different sectors of society value differently. Some people are like, once you have an opinion, you must stick to it despite all available information. Skip Bayless has made a career out of saying that LeBron James is just not that good at basketball. All right, man.
You got to do what you got to do. You know?
Good for, hey, it's been great for his wallet, his integrity, his, intelligent people thinking that he's actually intelligent and worth listening to. Maybe different story, but that dude has made a lot of money. So I guess good for him. I prefer people who are willing to take things as they come, willing to admit they don't necessarily know things along the way, and then ultimately, make decision when there's enough data and still be willing to change if more data emerges that pushes something different. That is very highfalutin language to say. We have been pretty consistent all year saying like, hey, Sam is here now, but there's a long way to go. We need to see more. After the game on Sunday, you were more definitive than I think you have been at any point where you're just like, hey, this kind of cements Sam Howell as a backup in my mind.
Yeah.
Why now for being that level of definitive, and how do you kind of explain your thought process throughout the year as an evaluator?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's this really interesting talent evaluation is always interesting, and I think it's really hard with the quarterback position specifically, and especially a young quarterback. And when you're looking at Sam, I think he does some stuff that's high level. And I think when you look early in the year, and we talked about this a lot, when he's hitting all these big time throws and he's elevating the offense and his ability to extend plays, and you're like, there is something here. There is a talent, there's an ability, there's a physical skill set that gets excited, and the moment doesn't seem too big for him, and it seems like he's got it, right? But you want to see how that goes, right? Because anytime you're doing statistics, the more data you can gather, the better, right? So earlier in the year, you're not playing against the best defenses of all time. You're kind of working through some stuff where he'd play a good defense, he'd look like he'd regressed, and he'd come back the next week and play a little bit better. And then now I think, I have a rule of thumb. Like if you can get 7 games of evaluation on a quarterback, it basically takes 7 games for the defense to understand what a quarterback is. And I feel like kind of right around that 7-game mark, that's when Sam really started hitting the skids a little bit, having a really hard time in terms of what was going on. I go back to that Cowboys game. And I know statistically he was very productive, but I think you kind of felt that the moment was starting to get too big for him. And then he goes on a little bit of a slide. I think you could even go back to the second New York Giants game, like just didn't really settle in. I'm trying to look up his stats right now for that game specifically, but then you get Miami, struggled again. He did some good things, but extending plays, working off schedule, you can't live in that. You can't live doing that. And then, going out to LA, struggled there, right? The game against the 49ers, I think he struggled there again too. And it's the same kind of issues popping up. And so the more, and during this time period, I watched more quarterbacks. I watched Tua, I watched Stafford, I watched, Brock Purdy, and you see kind of how the throws that they are making, the tight windows that they're maximizing, the anticipation that they're using. And you're like, Sam does not do these things. Like, I don't want to say at all, but it's very, 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 very rare to see them. And those things, those skill sets are very hard to develop. And so when he's making the big time throws, when he's extending and making plays and that elevate the offense, you say, okay, you can live with that. But when that stops and when that dries up, you see what the offense and this team becomes. And that's just not a tenable solution long term. Because I think, we mentioned O'Connell, the kid in Las Vegas. Like, he'll have games where you're like, wow, look at this big time throw. Look at this. And then he'll have games where he throws 4 picks. And I think it's emphatic that he's not a starter in the NFL. Like, he's a good backup quarterback, right? He's not a guy you can build around. Browning in Cincinnati had 3 or 4 games where he looked amazing, then comes back to earth. Like, that's the nature of a backup quarterback in the NFL, is they can give you something high level for a short period of time, but when it gets tight, when the situation gets hot, they don't have it. And I understand. I can hear everyone now. He's a young football player, but with the regime change imminent, he has not shown you enough to be like, we can build around him the way that Philadelphia built around Jalen Hurts, for example. And I think that's the thing. That's what I come back to. Is like, maybe if Ron was here for another year, you could say, okay, he can develop, he can grow. There's a staff that trusts and understand what he's doing, but that's not the case here. And I think they're gonna make a decision again for the franchise in terms of finding a guy that they believe that can handle the responsibilities of that position long term.
So a couple of different things. I think one, the most important thing you said there for like understanding purposes is what a backup is, which is not someone who can't play.
Right.
Like, backup quarterbacks in the NFL are really good relative to guys who are like non-league players, right? Like, occasionally you get a guy who comes in and you're like, that dude is not an NFL player. And it doesn't happen often at the quarterback position due to the nature of it. Like, typically the starter plays the whole year. If you get one injury, okay. Sometimes you get down to the 4th guy or 3rd guy. And even then, like, Tommy DeVito's fine for a couple of weeks. Right. But eventually you're like, nope, that dude is not an NFL starter. But every 2 or 3 times a year, maybe you get a guy who gets called up and you're just like, nope, not an NFL player. And that's when you see like the difference in that and a backup. Maybe the ultimate example of this, we were trying to think of this before the show. And we threw out a bunch of different guys who are like kind of backups that have done, if they play a whole season, like you can maybe win 8 games with them even.
Right.
Jameis Winston's kind of the high-end version of that, where he has the 30 touchdown, 30 pick year in Tampa. But then he has a great fit with Sean Payton, and they have a really great year in New Orleans. And, could Sam be that in the same way that like Baker's having a great year down in Tampa, but like still his great year is 8 wins. The ultimate example to me, and I'm curious what you think of this, is Nick Foles. Like, Nick Foles won a Super Bowl, right? Nick Foles won a freaking Super Bowl because he got hot at the right time,
exactly,
in the right system with the right guys around him. And so, yes, you can win with a quote-unquote backup quarterback, but then you see a couple other teams try to build around Nick Foles, and it doesn't work, and he's out of the league.
Right.
And so I think that's kind of what we're saying here is like a true starting quarterback that you feel good about is a guy that will give you it's not about how good is your good, it's about how consistently can you produce it. And I think where we are at right now with Sam Howell is we don't have a trust that week in, week out against any opponent you can trust him. Right now, his performance is correlated to how good the defense he is playing against is. And if it's a good defense, he's going to have a mediocre to bad performance. And if it's a bad defense, he can probably light him up for 300 yards. But that's not an NFL starter. Now, it's worth pointing out, Sam is young. He's 23. This is his second system in 2 years, his first year in this system. He works his butt off. He's got great character.
Yeah.
And I think those are the things that earlier in the year when we talk about why, I mean, I said on the radio multiple times, like I would bet on Sam Howell being the guy moving forward. Like I think that he's going to be the guy. And I think what happened was I looked at the character, I looked at the mental makeup.
Me too.
I looked at the maturity, I looked at the big time plays he made, and I go, that stuff you can't coach. I think the other stuff, the timing, the rhythm, the footwork is stuff that you can coach. And well, I still think that's true to an extent. It is really hard to get that stuff. Like it's kind of innate in a lot of levels. And he just hasn't improved in those areas. So you're projecting, saying the good is going to stay good. The bad is going to get better. And if the bad doesn't get better, well, that changes the projection. And now with the year's worth of starts under his belt, he got 17, the Dallas game last year, 16 this year. I think we're at a point where you go, okay, at the very least right now, this dude's a backup, someone who can play well on any given weekend, but is not to be trusted long-term. But he's more than likely based off of who he's been his entire career, not just in the pros, but in college, what the scouting report is. And maybe this is confirmation bias, but the stuff that you had worries about, the stuff that made him a 5th-round pick, and save your comments about how he was the number one guy before his final year at Carolina. He was a 5th-round pick. That's where the league said that he was. Anybody could have gotten him in the first 4 rounds. And, that stuff hasn't improved to a level to kind of change his long-term prognosis. I think he can be a very good backup. And I think that if we lived in an alternate universe where you could give him 2 years to continue to develop, could he be a starter, middle of the pack, type of starter? Probably. But if you can go get Caleb Williams, Jalen Daniels, Drake May, Michael Penix, Bo Nix, whoever it is that you wind up liking at the number 2 pick, or if you want to trade down, whatever, why would you wait on that? And that's kind of the way the league operates now.
Yeah. I think Geno Smith is a perfect case study for that. He came out, showed some ability early in his career, had to go to the bench. They drafted, I think, Mark Sanchez afterwards, right? Very high. And then, or
I
whatever
think the
that
timelines
order
are
is.
backwards on that.
Whatever. But they moved on, whatever it was. They moved on from him. He sits for a couple of years and gets an opportunity in Seattle. And I definitely think that's on the table for him. But I think it just, again, the stuff that's was raw in college, is like the anticipation, the accuracy, the ability to operate in the timing of the offense is something else that shows up all the time with him. And the young quarterbacks have a hard time with it. And this is something that I think is really an interesting thought experiment about like being able to sit a quarterback for a couple of years. Like I look at Mahomes and how successful he was. Like it's an important variable. If you're going to like develop that guy, like you just need to give them time and opportunity. And obviously Sam didn't get that. And people can talk about, is it fair? Is it fair that the situation Sam was put in? And it's not. But ultimately, like this is how it goes. Like I remember having a conversation with Rex Grossman about kind of how he stumbled early in his career. And then it took so long for him to get back to have the starting opportunity. And he's like, was it fair? No, but like that's just how the league is. Like you need some level of certainty, and you also need some level of investment from the organization. So I always think like if he was a 1st-round pick, maybe you sitting with him, you say, okay, we got to make it work. Like we've made this investment in him, kind of like they did with Dwayne. Like it was very clear early Dwayne was struggling with some stuff, but he's a 1st-round pick, so they gave him more opportunities. Same thing with Robert. Robert obviously had that tremendous year, but when the struggles came, they were invested in him. And I think being a 5th-round pick, just they're not financially, or there's no draft capital in him. So now the new franchise, draft a guy, and then you're tied to that guy for a couple of years. And it might not be the right fit. It might not be the right. I'm not saying they're going to hit on the pick. Ideally, you'd want that. But it's the logistics and the business side of the NFL, I think, at play here also in terms of Sam and his development, what he's shown this year. Because like earlier in the year, like he was going to have to play very, very well in order for them to kind of say, oh, we can build around him in 2024. But and he showed flashes of that. But I'm just looking at this sheet here, right? Like he played against Philly twice, and they're struggling defensively. They've struggled the whole year. But the second you play the Bills, you play the Giants, when you play the Bears, like defenses that are a little bit more consistent, the Giants again, the Commanders, the Cowboys, the Rams, the Jets, and the 49ers, he has a grade below 50 in all those games, all of them, right? And so to me, that makes a lot of sense that he's not, again, as much as the good was good, the bad was also very bad. And I think you kind of settle on this thing where he's kind of in the middle someplace, and that's kind of to your point, Craig. Like, it's not saying he's a bad football player. It's not saying he's a bad guy. It's not saying he doesn't have the skills and the ability to do something special down the road, but he's not there right now, and the organization's not going to invest in it. And I think that's another thing fans need to understand. Like, there's a lot of really good football players in the league who just didn't hit for him at the right time. And I think that's kind of what we're looking at with Sam, unfortunately for Sam.
Yeah, no, I think that's really well put. I mean, at the end of the day, this is a young kid who's worked really hard, has been given a test that we have outlined ad nauseum, is way too hard for him to reasonably pass. He has continued to be an amazing teammate throughout. I mean, that is one thing that I will say on the positive side for Sam is, like, his teammates love him.
Yeah.
And, like, the O-line, who he has made look bad at times and has taken a lot of heat because of the way he plays, loves that kid. And I think there's something to say for that, what might be said is, like, you can trust him to be your backup. He's not going to sabotage. He's not going to be a bad soldier in the whatever. Like, he's someone you can trust, and he's going to go out and support whoever is in the quarterback room with him next year, if that's Caleb Williams or Drake May or whoever. And that's great. That speaks highly of Sam as a human being. Unfortunately, it doesn't mean that he's the guy that you should build around. At the same token, I will say this last thing real quick before we get into the actual tape from Sunday. If they decide they don't really like any of these quarterbacks, if the new regime gets in and goes, we can't pass up on Olu Fashanu or Marvin Harrison or Joe Alt or whoever, because I think that guy's the non-quarterback is going to go to the Hall of Fame, and I don't think this guy we're going to draft is going to be any better than Sam Howell. You could start with Sam Howell and not be dead in the water. Like, you can have the bridge guy, like other organizations have done, and hope that, you build up a good enough roster. And this is, again, a project we're going to embark on this offseason, is like, look at how some of the best organizations have built it. And you could probably be somewhat competitive next year, depending on how good your coaching is and how well you do in the rest of the draft and free agency and all of that. But if you're talking about, like, a viable chance to build a long-term contender, which is Josh Harris's stated goal, like, you're eventually going to need to do something about the position.
Well, also, I just think it goes back to this conversation we've had ad nauseum. And when Jared Goff left LA, I think a lot of people thought he was cooked and he was the bridge guy, but he got in a system with a coordinator, with skill position guys, and an offensive line and a defense that elevated him. And I think, like, there is a situation where you say, hey, we get a left tackle, we're able to move, or a right tackle, we're able to move Wiley into guard, and all of a sudden the offensive line looks really dynamic. You get guys who are competitive and physical at 3 of 4 spots or 3 of 5 spots. And you say, oh, well, we can draft a receiver in the second round. We got 2 second-round picks. And you kind of build that up. You say, oh, we get a corner in the second round with that second pick. And you're like, okay, all of a sudden there's something going on here that you feel pretty good about. And I
fill out a lot of stuff with your $80 million of cap space.
Right. You go sign a pass rusher that you feel good about. Right. And I look at Philly, and when again, Jalen Hurts was there, or I look at San Francisco when Brock Purdy came in, like, they were system quarterbacks that everyone thought was going to be a bridge, but the system and the personnel around them elevated. And it allowed them, like, I think Joe Flacco is another great example of this. Shoot, Russell Wilson's a great example of this. Yeah. Great defense, great rushing attacks. It lets you sit and kind of chill for a year or two as a quarterback. And then all of a sudden the paradigm shifts at the position, and you say, oh, like, he's developed, he's grown up. He's all the stuff we talked about in the Take 5 in terms of adding information to the CPU, instead of doing it 50 times every game over the course of, like, your rookie season, essentially. It's like, we've brought that way down. We're going to let you learn and let you develop. And then once you're kind of more established, like, look at Brock Purdy last year to this year. Last year, definitively a system quarterback. This year, elevating that offense. And I think that is something that can I think can definitely happen with Sam. I think it happened with a lot of guys.
Yeah, but that's the best case scenario.
It takes a lot. It's going to take a lot. And so what did we just talk about there? Getting more playmakers, getting a better, a more, I don't want to say a better system, because I think this system's fine. I think EB is a smart guy, but something that, again, is going to de-leverage him, improving the defense. Like, it just becomes a little bit more complicated, as opposed to finding Joe Burrow, where you have maybe the worst O-line in football as a rookie, but you get the Chase in the second year, Jamar Chase in his second year, and all of a sudden it's one of the most explosive offenses in football. Like, that's the stepping stones there are much shorter and it's much more direct. I think it's harder to find that one guy. But again, that's kind of what we're talking about here from a team building standpoint. So I think you bring up a great point. Like maybe the kid Drake May is not the guy. Maybe they don't love him. Maybe he botches an interview. Maybe whatever. It's not good, and they can't trade up to get the number one pick. And because Caleb Williams is their guy, take an offensive lineman. Maybe you take a quarterback in the second round. Whatever it is, but there are many ways to build this team, and I think this is in some ways an endorsement of Sam. I think he's talented enough to do some of the things we're talking about in terms of being this bridge guy that could develop. But there's a lot of pieces that need to fall in place in order for that to happen.
Yeah, I think what we can definitively say after watching this game and kind of watching the entire season is like that's the best case scenario for him. This is not someone where you walk into the offseason going, we're set at quarterback. And that's kind of, I think, what we mean by cemented as a backup or a bridge guy or whatever term you want to use for that. Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. It's Wednesday. I almost said it was Friday. It's not. It's 5:30. It's Wednesday. Coming up at 6 o'clock, Mitch Tischler will join us. Of course, Beltway Football Podcast with JB Finley. Mitch, so good on all things Commanders, always locked in, always has a nice little tidbit of information hidden somewhere in his answers that you're like, wait a second, hold on. Let's circle back to that. So Mitch will join us, and then Dave Johnson will join us because it is a Wizards game day. Real things coming up at the end of the show as well. But 5:30 on a Wednesday means, Anthony, it is time to read them comments.
It's time to read those comments, baby.
We tried to warn them. They didn't listen.
Yeah!
Every week, the Hoffman Show goes into the belly of the beast.
We read those comments, baby.
Never read the comments.
All right, every Wednesday at 5:30, we dive into the YouTube comments at Craig Hoffman, at the Team 980, where we post clips of the show. If you're not subscribed, our goal is to get the Team 980's account to 1,000 followers by the Super Bowl. So we got about a month to do it. We need a little under 200. So if you haven't subscribed there, please, by all means, do so. We stream our entire show live there every day exclusively on the video side. And, of course, we post the highlights there and on my page at Craig Hoffman. All right, Anthony, it has been a doozy of a week for comments because people just have such strong opinions on things that are polar opposites. So I think it's pretty interesting. Like, it seems like half the comments, like Logan and I, and on this show, obviously, because my opinion doesn't change from Take Command to the Hoffman Show. I just express it, into the same microphone often. Or the one in the studio versus the one at home. Point is, we're like, hey, this is who Sam is. He's a high-end backup. He's a guy you could win games with, but not a guy you should rely on necessarily. Probably best to move on in 2024. And then the comments are on the polar extremes of those two things. The comments are either Sam is and always has been terrible. He sucks. He's irredeemable. And you should feel shame for ever thinking that he could be good. Or Sam Howell is actually God's gift to quarterbacking, and if all he needs is a little bit more time to develop and a better play caller, better defense, and a better everything around him. I find that hilarious because people react that way watching the same videos, listening to the same conversation. So it is a lot of just people hearing what they want to hear, et cetera, et cetera. Also, I will say this before we dive into the comments themselves. People have started doing this weird thing on videos where they'll be like, bro, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, who are you talking to? Because that comment doesn't make sense with this video. And they'd be like, it's my take. And I'm like, you understand how YouTube works? Like, who just goes to YouTube and uses it as their journal, as their diary? So I'm gonna politely ask, if you're doing that, don't. For your own good. Just go buy a diary. They have probably new fancy ones that are for a year. I'm just trying to help you out. All right. To the comments themselves. Starting with Brian Mulholland, who came at me strong. Brian Mulholland, 2467, who says, I find it a bit disingenuous for Craig to act like he was in the withhold judgment camp when he was doing segments calling Howell a top 10 QB and asking what more people needed to see earlier in the year. If you want to be a hot take artist, don't assume people won't remember. The problem with that positivity and with the current negativity is sample size. Sam's a young quarterback. He did, in fact, improve his game in multiple ways during the season. What he's going through now could just be the ups and downs of an inexperienced QB, or it could be that this is who he is. We only get 17 games of sample size for the incoming regime to make a decision on. I wish it was more, but it's not. Ultimately, Craig is right with what Sam did in his 17-game sample wasn't good enough to pass on a QB in the draft if you have a shot at someone the new regime loves. I think Brian's comment on my disingenuousness is not reflective of what actually happened this season. I think we tried to. And Anthony, you tell me if I just trying to be too kind to myself in hindsight here. But I feel like we made a real effort to say, this is where it is right now. This is the direction it's trending, but all sales are not final. Right? Like, it was something where I said, hey, I don't know what more people want to see from Sam other than more of this. And sometimes that was it. It's like, hey, he's doing all the right things. He's just got to keep doing it. Then he didn't. And that trajectory, that progression versus regression versus neutral state is the whole thing. So it's not one, like, I don't know. If you get off calling me a hot take artist, like, you just don't listen to the show. Like, I strive so hard not to be. Anytime I feel like there are times that before the show, I'll fire off some spicy take to Anthony, and then we'll start talking about it, and I'll mellow it down because, like, I don't want to bring that to the air. I try to be extraordinarily responsible with what I say into these microphones. So, like, that's a personal whatever. But I really do think we did as good of a job as anybody of trying to do the exact opposite. So if I failed, like, I own it. I'm sorry. But, like, we really did try to say, like, hey, this is trending the right direction until the moment that it wasn't. And then we said that too.
Yeah, I think you were pretty consistent just all year, to be honest, just saying, like, we need a larger sample size of Sam Howell's games in order to, fully evaluate, who he is as a player. And, everybody, was jumping the gun and saying, he's our franchise QB, John Allen, Ron Rivera. Everybody's backing him up. And I don't think we really fell into that trap. We just wanted to see more. And that's pretty much what the rest of the season was geared towards. Is Sam our QB one of the future kind of thing? And he sort of kind of went about answering it for us.
Yeah, my thought process all along is, like, we don't know what we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing, is, like, we didn't know how he would do after he got past, like, 7 games worth of tape for the defenses had on him. The answer was not good. And part of that was certainly the circumstances. And I do feel like, and I'm not saying this just to toot my own horn, I'm just saying, like, if you think I'm the hot take guy, like, I was before everyone else saying that the way they were playing was a problem. Like, other people were buying into the Rivera, Bieniemy, like, this is good for his development. I was like, no, this is terrible for his development. And people were like, oh, well, this is just the way EB is. He knows what he's doing. I'm like, I don't doubt that EB is really smart, but this is a bad idea. And, like, now everyone's parroting my point back to me like I wasn't the one who said it first. And again, like, I'm going to stop right there because I'm already, like, sweating uncomfortable because I've now made this about me as opposed to about the subject matter at hand. The point is, like, it takes, Logan said it in Take Command, it's 7 games worth of tape is kind of his threshold for how do defenses react, because now they've got tape on you. And once they had the tape, the answer was not good. The circumstances certainly could have been better. I like a lot about Sam, but we're at a point in the timeline, realistically, where I think it can't be option A. You're not dead if he's a bridge guy for you next year. And maybe he does turn into Jalen Hurts, or Brock Purdy even, to an extent, where those guys were like, they showed just something, but, like, you weren't like, this is definitely our long-term plan, and they got another year because of circumstances. In Brock Purdy's case, they won a ton of games, and they saw some stuff that was encouraging, and kind of the way the timeline worked out. He only had to play 8 games, and then he got hurt in the playoffs, and there wasn't that chance for a first-season regression. And in Jalen's case, like, they had invested a second-round pick in the guy, so, like, he was worth them continuing down that road on. And then lo and behold, like, there was a huge leap multiple years into their careers. And maybe if if the draft falls in a way that Sam winds up being a bridge guy for you next year, then, or something wacky happens, you draft your quarterback, that guy gets hurt in the spring, and all of a sudden Sam's the bridge guy to what you think is your young quarterback starting in year 2. And Sam is incredible. Maybe that happens. I don't think that's impossible. But you have to make the best decision you can based off of the evidence that's available now. And that evidence, to me, is pretty clear that you should pursue a quarterback in the draft, whether it's at the second pick or later in the first round with a trade back or whatever it may be. All right. Continuing on with the comments. Andrew Thomas, 3478 says, I pull for Howell. He's a great kid and tough as nails, and the arm talent is real. The situational stuff is real, re-scheme, O-line, etc. The reality is that he does have glaring deficiencies that he's had since college. What we have seen is regression to his mean. People like to quote Manning's rookie year, etc. That's fine, but Manning was a number 1 pick, and you also saw progression throughout the year, not regression. Regression is bad, especially with the young QB. Good take, Craig. Actually, it's a W take. I'm guessing that's a winning take. The future is bright. New GM, new GM, 5 top 100 picks and a loaded draft, $120 million in cap space if you restructure some contracts, and a loaded free agency. Ben Johnson or Frank Smith or Bobby Slowick dialing it up. Let's go. Like, yeah, that's the point. Is you have to be, wary of confirmation bias, but you also can't ignore when you think something is true and then it happens. And so if the deficiencies in Sam's game, his ability to avoid pressure in a way that's productive, his inability to read the middle of the field, his accuracy stuff, some decision-making qualms, throwing with anticipation, which is a must in the NFL. If those things don't improve, you don't get to continue to, have that opportunity to grow. It's just the reality of it. And that's what we saw in the back half of the season from Sam Howell. I really like that phrase in Andrew's comment, a regression to his mean. Quadruple Dubs says, having film to study against makes a huge difference, especially when the player isn't great. In my opinion, that's exactly what happened with Howell. I still think Sam's better than his draft position, but there's no way a brand new staff is going to roll the dice on a guy that's graded as a 5th-round talent, especially with the number 2 pick. I think it's worth pointing out that, before the benching games, when we had Matt Miller on take command, he loves Jaden Daniels, thinks he's a top 5 pick, was like, I would stick with Howell. But I think what you saw in those games is what happens when elite defenses have film on Sam at this stage in his career. And it's benchable bad. And you just can't live like that. And that puts him, do I think Sam is better than Nick Mullins? Sure. But that's the Nick Mullins thing. Nick Mullins is talented. He can have big games, but he also could throw 4 picks with regularity. There's plenty of other guys like that in the league, that kind of 25 to 40 best quarterbacks on the planet. Guys that can absolutely win games, can rip you a 300-yard, 3-touchdown, no-pick game every once in a while. But over time, if teams get tape on you in a scheme and see what you want to do, they're going to limit you to 170, 1 touchdown, and 2 picks. And that's going to kind of be the average day. And that's not what you're looking for. Can that be enhanced to a 225, 1 touchdown, 1 pick day if you have great talent around? Sure. Can you win football games like that if your defense is fantastic? Absolutely. But does it mean you should stop, just invest in that guy and stop searching for quarterback? No. But I do think it's good enough that you're not we don't have a quarterback next year. We have to take someone at 2. If you want to swing for Penix or Nix or whoever later in the first round and trade back, or trade back into the first round, or hope that one of them falls to the early second, that's not the worst thing either. That brings us to our buddy William's comment. William Bontrager, 2349 says, let's calm down. While I agree that Sam's play does fluctuate wildly based on opponent, so does most quarterbacks. The question is, why does he fluctuate? Is it a fixable issue or an issue of lack of ability? He threw, or will throw, for 4,000 yards and at least 20 touchdowns and at least 19 picks. That's not a great season, but it's not a terrible one either, considering. Can a new scheme, better line, and any kind of run game pick or cut the picks in half and add 10 more TDs? If you can have a 4,000-yard, 30-touchdown, 10-interception quarterback, then that's the NFL's, or that's a top 10 NFL QB. If Caleb Williams falls in your lap, then okay, I got that. If not, and Marvin Harrison Jr. or a trade down that nets more than a 2025 first is on the table, then I take that over Mays or Daniels. Maybe you take a quarterback in the second or third to compete, but you give Howell another year in a new system. This is a plan that I'm actually more fine with than probably some people would imagine. If you can trade down, get an elite player, get a second awesome pick for next year, if New England wants to trade up because they really love one of the quarterbacks or whatever, and you can stay in the top 5, top 7, and you draft a guy, I don't even know who the third rounders are this year, but maybe the top of the second you can get Nix or Penix, and those guys compete with Howell with the hope that eventually one of them takes over. And again, maybe Sam winds up winning the job by a distinct amount, and you do wind up with a guy who, in another year and a better running game and better players around him and a better line has a monster year. Because you're right, if you can get a 4,000-yard, 30-touchdown, 10-pick season out of this guy, then he's your guy. I just think that's unlikely. I think getting the picks down below 15 is going to be really hard. I think adding another 10 touchdowns is significant. That's like, 2 every 3 games kind of add here. And I don't know that is there. Especially if you're talking about can the interceptions come way down if you add a run game? Sure. But part of the reason he has so many passing touchdowns is because he got so many passing attempts. So all those stats are inflated. So if you cut the passing attempts down, can you get to 4,000? Are you efficient enough as a passer? Can you get to 30 touchdowns? Do you have that big play ability? He hasn't necessarily shown that despite the arm talent this year. He's missed some opportunities down the field for a variety of reasons, and certainly a better offensive line could help enhance some of that. So it cuts both ways. But at the end of the day, there's a lot. When you go to the first part of Williams' comment, is it a fixable issue or an issue of lack of ability? His career would tell you, despite the physical talents, despite some of the high-end stuff he does, it's a lack of ability in terms of consistency. And that feels so harsh because I really like Sam's makeup. I like his mentality. Like, I like all that stuff. But if you just be like, hey, I'm going to be less empathetic. I'm going to be less nice. I'm just going to harshly, and not harshly in terms of like I'm going to be extra mean about it, but like I'm not going to soften it. I'm going to give the evaluation. He's a guy that struggled throughout his entire career to throw with anticipation. He has been extremely dependent on the talent around him at Carolina. And everyone likes to point to that senior year. It's like, oh, well, he ran more. And it's like, okay, if you stuck a super high-end quarterback, they would elevate lesser players, not be like, oh, we have to change the entire game. So there's some wiggle room on the argument for there. So he's relying on the talent around him. And he doesn't see the field great. Those were things that I was hoping earlier in the year would get better. They didn't, which is why we're here. These are my favorite, Anthony. User CX9ZU6CD9Z. When you sign up for YouTube, just put your name. Anthony, you're on YouTube, yeah?
Yep.
Do you have a screen name handle? Like if you were to leave a comment, do you have a name or are you user blah, 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 blah?
So this is the account that my brother and I made when I was 11 years old. And it's just J, the capital letter N, Ant, and we were both born in 1996.
So yours J and Ant, 1996.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good.
It's nothing crazy.
It's better than user CX9ZU6CD9Z on the turbo. Ready? Turbo set hut.
Yeah, call him the alphabet man. It's good gracious.
It's a lot. It'd be great in Scrabble, though. Got some X's, got some Z's. C's worth a nice amount of points. Got a couple of those. Just saying. Good luck putting that down on a Scrabble board without your family throwing the tiles at you. Yeah. Anyway, his comment is, what happened to Sam not having a running game and now is shell-shocked just last week, never given a good chance. Sure did flip that quick, but I do listen to you. Thanks, user 9C, whatever. Yeah, he looked better this week. He looked really bad the week before. This is what happens. Again, like, I don't really understand folks who don't want to take in new information and pretend like it matters. Like, you take in more data points as they come, and that influences your decision. These things are fluid. Players grow, players regress, situations change, or in terms of personnel around them. Like, there's a lot of things that go into these factors. So, like, yeah, he looked shell-shocked, and then all of a sudden I'm like, yeah, I would start him in the finale because he looks really good or not looked really good, but he didn't look shell-shocked anymore. I think that there was, like, him getting benched, even though he didn't miss a game, was enough to kind of relieve the pressure mentally to get him back on track. So that's good, I guess. Mr. DCB215, let's say we draft a quarterback in the first round. Let's say that drafted quarterback performed the same way Howell has, 20 TD passes, another 5 rushing, threw 19 interceptions, etc. Let's also say there was a brand new coordinator, one of the worst defenses in the league, and the team ended up winning 4 games. At the end of the season, would you say we need to move on? And I think this argument has been made a lot. So I'm hoping that everyone who is making this argument is going to listen to me when I tell you this very basic statement and then explanation. The basic statement is, it's not the same. A 5th rounder going into year 3 is different than a 1st rounder going into year 2. First, the contract, right? Contractually, 1st rounder, 5-year contract. 5-year, team control, good price. First 4, excellent price. 5th-year option, moderately expensive, but not nearly as expensive as a veteran quarterback deal. Often, though, after your first 4 years, you wind up signing it to spread out the cap hit on that 5th year and moving forward. So you get 4 years of really good price versus 2 years left on Sam of really good price. So that's, or 3 years left after a quarterback's rookie year as a first rounder. That's thing 1. Thing 2, and I cannot stress this enough, draft stock, draft position is not randomly assigned. It isn't like they did a lottery ball and they're like, Sam Howell, 5th rounder, Caleb Williams, 1st, Troy Aikman, 1st. No. Professional scouts, who are the best in the world at what they do, looked at these players and said, this guy is probably going to be excellent. We should take him in the 1st round. Then they play out that rookie season and they show a lot of flashes of the thing that you thought. They hopefully, over the course of that, the deficiencies that give you any kind of reservation dissipate and the player improves and progresses. And you're like, wow, this was a good investment. Hopefully he continues to do that and we can continue to improve the team around him and we'll win way more than 4 games. When a guy is a 5th round pick, he's a 5th round pick for a reason. There are enough deficiencies, significant deficiencies in his game to drop him, especially a guy who has the upside of Sam Howell from an arm talent standpoint, down to the 5th round. And when you see those deficiencies play out, and they are a big reason why he takes so many sacks, a big reason why he throws so many interceptions, yes, despite the other circumstances, then you go, hey, we were probably right about this kid. A 5th round pick becoming a good backup is actually a good draft pick. We did success, but not miracle. And you keep searching. And I cannot stress enough that, yes, I understand the logic here. Because I do think when you look at Sam and you strip away the draft stock, he's a 23-year-old kid who has shown incredible toughness and resilience and has shown some flashes and did show some growth in areas this year. Not as much as you'd like, but did show some. And in that way, giving him another year is not outrageous. So hear me out on that. It's not like you're an idiot for thinking this. You're not dumb. You don't know nothing about football, whatever. It does mean, though, that it is probably worth looking somewhere else because it's confirming the concerns that you had going in, and the contract all of a sudden becomes an issue because in year 3 of 4, if he is good next year, you're coming up on making a decision on paying him a ton of money versus a team that looks like it needs a substantial rebuild on some level, resetting the timeline and giving yourself a lot of flexibility in terms of resources to pay other guys and bring in key free agents at other positions to support a young quarterback for more years than just the 2 remaining on Howell's contract. That's where we end. Never read the comments today. When we get back, Mitch Tischler joins us here on the Team 980. is the Hoffman Show, final hour here on the Team 980. Of course, you're home not just for the most Commanders talk in D.C., but Wizards basketball as well. Dave Johnson will join us from Cleveland coming up in about 12 minutes. We spend the next 10, though, with our buddy Mitch Tischler, of course, Beltway Football Podcast. Mitchell, Happy New Year, sir. How are you?
Happy New Year to you, too. I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm doing well, Mitch. We finally have made it. I mean, I don't want to speak too soon, but I think we're basically in the clear. There is clear runway ahead. The end of the season is finally coming.
I mean, thank goodness. It's been a good 4 or 5 weeks where I've been struggling to try and talk real football and have meaningful conversations that matter. But, yeah, we're about, 5-6 days away from sweeping changes, and finally we can start talking about, what the future might look like.
For sure. Although it's still at this point is so hypothetical. I mean, I was ready to just scream in the first hour. We've now reached like the point where people are calling in with like these super hot QB takes because they've watched 2 games worth of highlights, and I'm just like, this cannot be my life for the next 4 months. So I'm gonna ask you, like, is there anything that at this point on January 3rd, whether it's organizational structure, the way they need to go at quarterback, that at least high level you feel very strongly and definitively about?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a long time since this franchise built out a football operation the way that most NFL franchises do, and that starts with hiring your top football person, whether that's a GM or a VP of player personnel or whatever wording you want to use for that top person, and kind of building on down from that. And I say that because obviously there are a ton of names that we can talk about for head coach. There's a ton of names you can talk about for GM, but I want the organization and the Harris group to decide who is going to be their top football person and let that football person start building out where we go from there. And that might mean we have a little bit of time between the firing, the first hiring, and then ultimately when you go out and get an actual head coach of the football team. And that's okay. This can be a process that doesn't have to be sped through. It can be deliberate. I'm sure they've done a ton of work all season on folks that they're interested in, but I want this thing to be built out as you see other professional NFL franchises built out, and that's from the top on down, and not mixing and matching and forcing a GM with a head coach that might not necessarily gel, or an OC with a head coach that, aren't on the same page. And so as we get to kind of the end of the season, there's going to be a lot of clamoring, and there's going to be a lot of talk of names that folks have heard or read about. I want this to be very deliberate and very and in a succession.
You and I are on the exact same page. Organizational structure is the thing that I feel most strongly about. I do worry is too strong, but I do wonder the timeline element of this. Obviously the deeper you go into the coaching cycle, the deeper you go into the executive cycle, more people get hired and become not available to you as options. So how critical is it in your mind to at least get that top person in quickly so you can get on people's radars and be like, hey, we're interested in you? And do you have strong feelings on whether that's an executive or president of football operations, an executive VP, or just do you just go hire the GM?
I think based on the way that we've seen kind of other Harris-owned teams be built out over the years, they're probably going to go with some president of football operations and then kind of work your way down. And that's okay. I agree with you. Obviously the longer all the rest of the hiring take, the more coaches that, may get hired out from under you. But at the end of the day, based on where this team is and where it needs to get to, it's so much more important to get that organizational chart correct than it is to land the hottest head coach candidate. If the season ends and the Lions lose in the first round and the Panthers offer $20 million a year, okay, obviously we all would have liked, Ben Johnson to be the head coach, but if he ends up not being the guy, he ends up not being the guy. And so to me, I would like to start getting those guys in early. But if you start looking at some of these teams that are going to make deep runs into the playoffs, and you're not able to pull a GM out of there who you might want to be either your GM or your president of football operations or whatever role it is, I'm okay with being patient here. And I'd like to get the best head coach possible, but more so, I want to get the top of the order right first, and then work my way down.
Mitch Tischler, Beltway Football Podcast, with us here on the Hoffman Show. Ready for the unpopular question, Mitch?
Well, are you gonna hit me with a draft question right away?
No. We have 4 months to do draft. I'm good on that. Here's my unpopular question. Is there anybody that you think should stay? Like organizationally, whether it's business side, someone who you think has done a good job, someone in, scouts, front office type, the strength staff, if you're on the EB, should get more of a shot side. Like, is there anybody that you're like, hey, I know everyone just wants to clean house, but I think this person actually, it would be worth keeping? Or are you on full, like, almost clean house for the sake of cleaning house?
So I got to be honest with you. I've done this a couple of different times, and maybe it's a cop out or whatever. I do think there needs to be a massive overhaul. I also think it's incredibly distasteful to be posturing about who we think is going to get fired and who's not going to get fired and who deserves to stay and who doesn't deserve to stay per se. I do believe that 98% of the names that folks know in the organization will probably be moved on from. And I do think that when you get into some of the area scouts and some of the deeper dive there, some folks who I feel like have done a pretty decent job, but maybe haven't had their voice listened to as much as they should. Maybe some of those folks are in the group that stays. But, I hate going back to it, but ultimately whoever that top football person is the one I want making the decisions, not, kind of this court of public opinion. And, you said it at the beginning of the hour, people watch Michael Penix play one football game and all of a sudden he should be the number one overall pick. People are going to read one article about this employee and think he or she is either the best or the worst without, having a real grasp of what the overall work that's been done there. So to me, to start, kind of guessing who's going to stay, who's going to go is kind of not really a lane that I really want to go down.
Honestly, that's a great answer, though, because I think you tell people something as someone who's out there every day, someone who's been around this organization and knows a lot of people, something that they might not realize, which is like, oh, these draft picks for Rivera or the Rivera era have been terrible. And it's like, yeah, well, sometimes there's scouts that had different thoughts and different opinions. And I think that's important to realize that, like, some level of continuity is always important. Not everyone who is involved in all these decisions actually necessarily agree with him. That is the nature of a large organization. And it's why I asked it specifically in terms of, like, if there's anybody that you were like, I really like that person's work. And obviously I think there's some people that we probably both could highlight that nobody has either heard of or cared about. But I did intentionally ask it that way in terms of staying versus like, hey, who are you most excited to see fired? Because at the end of the day, these are human beings. And I think that's important to remember, even if we're all ready for the changes to happen, it's because we know they're coming and the purgatory sucks, not because we're looking forward to people losing their jobs.
Right. And as frustrating as this season and the past 4 years and heck, the past 3 decades have been, folks shouldn't be celebrating, other folks getting fired. But, it's kind of besides the point. I think that, when it comes down to it, the Harris group doesn't have a ton of football first knowledge. So kind of everything that they're going to be doing is going to be, kind of a first for them within the ranks of the NFL. So, as much as we talk about kind of the hot young guns and, some of these names that folks are excited about, I think you also have to understand that there needs to be some, kind of organizational and National Football League kind of history and folks that know kind of how everything works and the ins and outs of it. So, as much as some of these, young head coaches are going to be, super exciting to talk about, you do need some of that kind of, organizational knowledge and kind of the way that the NFL works. So I do think there's going to be a nice mix of kind of, veterans, old heads, guys who have been there, done that, men and women who have been there and done that. And then obviously as you work your way down, there'll be some young, fresh minds that should be and I think that's kind of a great way to start building an organization with a lot of different ideas from a lot of different places and building off of that.
No doubt about it. And obviously for more on all of that from Mitch's perspective as well as JP Finley's, you can check out the Beltway Football Podcast wherever you get your pods. Mitchell, thank you for your time as always. I will see you, I guess, at FedEx on Sunday and then for whatever happens on Monday.
Yep, we're going to have a long 24 hours there between the Sunday afternoon game and locker cleanout and then whatever happens on Monday afternoon.
Yes, it is going to be, but we'll all do it together, so that's fun. Thanks, Mitch. See you, buddy.
Absolutely. Thank you, bud.
All right, that is Mitch Tischler with us here on the Hoffman Show. Dave Johnson joins us on a Wizards game day from Cleveland next. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Wizards game days. We're about 30 minutes from pregame in Cleveland. Hello, Cleveland. And that means it's time to say hello to Dave Johnson. Anthony, proper introduction, please.
Time to get the radio party started.
Blocked by Bilal Coulibaly. Oh boy, did he stuff him. Left wing pull, it's there. Oh, that's a pool party. Near the basket slam right there. And they're stealing the slam. You better go on. intercepted by Kispert. Kispert now, foul line. Oh, slam. Ooh, that'll jar your preserves.
It's time for Dave Johnson on a Wizards game day.
Kuzma for three. Oh, it's there. It's there. Big shot.
On the Hoffman Show.
Dave joins us from Cleveland ahead of the first of two Cavs-Wizards games in Cleveland this week. Dave, Happy New Year. How was your New Year's?
Well, Happy New Year. As always, I was in bed by 10 after that thrilling Wizards game on Sunday where we almost won 2 in a row. And I was just looking at the court here at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse, whatever this place is called. And in big letters across the middle of the court, it says the land. And just reminded me that somehow all this hip stuff, like, we call where we live the DMV, right? But I grew up in the DMV, but I don't remember when we started calling it the DMV. And so now Cleveland is the land. So it just, we have perfectly good city names, but that's not good enough. And again, we have individual identities in our respective states, Maryland, Virginia, and D.C., as people out there are probably saying, yeah, D.C. should be a state. So, but yet we're the DMV or we're the land. So it's just, see, this is what happens. You have to understand. When you reach game 33 of an NBA season, this is where your mind starts to wander.
Mm-hmm. I see. No, see, I feel like the land started when LeBron was there. There was and Cleveland has been nicknamed Believeland before, and I wonder if it went Believeland to just the land, like believe land to just the land. That I feel like you should ask around, Dave, and this could be material for you and Glenn to dice up. I don't know, mid-second quarter-ish tonight.
Well, and we're here again on Friday, so right. I will endeavor to report back to the Hoffman Show listening audience on the genesis or etymology, I think is the correct word, or is that something you do with plants? Forget. But
no, etymology is correct.
That's correct. So I'm showing off that Towson State education again. So it's just an interesting thought that occurred to me. It's big letters. It says the land, and so. But, this is part of the times change. I mean, I've been doing NBA games so long. I remember coming here when the flats were hot. I don't know if you remember the flats, and that's when Cleveland had an all-star game in the early 90s, and everybody was saying, well, the flats are great. Well, the flats are done. They're gone now, and Cleveland, the hot place is downtown. So things change.
Things definitely do change. Unfortunately, the Wizards. Yeah, no, that's good note. Good note. The Wizards are trying to change their record. I'm trying to. That was my best shot at the transition, Dave. I don't know if it was particularly great, but we're just gonna keep it moving. They're trying to change their fortunes this season. I mean, obviously we know that long term, like, they don't really care about the result of this season. They are in such a deep hole. It's not like they're trying to make the playoffs. But they've certainly been more competitive as of late. They've won a couple of games in the last 2 weeks or so. 4-point loss to Atlanta the other day. How do you think that over the next month this rotation starts to change? And do you think we see more of guys like Bilal Coulibaly, et cetera, over the next month? And obviously we had a big NBA trade with the Knicks this weekend. Like, are we now kind of in that mode where we're all on alert at all times for some of the changes we expect to come to happen sooner rather than later?
Well, I don't know if you're going to see dramatic changes. And with Bilal Coulibaly, look, they've been terrifically pleased with this progress, but they have the luxury of bringing him along at the pace they want to bring him along at. So, and that was what they indicated when I say they, the Wizards manager at the start of the season. And I don't expect that to change. I do expect more wins in January, and I understand that's it's a low bar, but the point is, this team is trending in the right direction. It could have won 2 in a row against Atlanta after the win over Brooklyn the other night. So if you look at this overall, some of the defensive numbers are still not great. But if you break it down in segments, it is absolutely trending better. And so now we've turned the calendar and we're getting closer to the All-Star break, a.k.a. The trade deadline time. It's going to be an interesting time because look, this is part of what is going on with this team. This is not the roster we're going to roll with for the next 4 years or whatever. It's the beginning. I was talking to somebody earlier today. Look, I believe Kyle Kuzma is somebody that you can go to bed at night saying he's part of the long-term future. He came back to this franchise. He signed a contract extension. He's playing, quite frankly, at an all-star level. He's a player that they've identified that they want him to be a part of this team going forward. Now, Tyus Jones is having a terrific season. He's leading the NBA in assist to turnover ratio. He is just a wonderful, wonderful guy. But, I bet you there's a lot of teams out there looking at him. And I don't know that. As I said, I use the official term, I bet you. So it's going to be an interesting 6 weeks from a standpoint of what the Wizards want to have going forward, because when you look at who, to me, is the talk of the NBA this season, it's the Orlando Magic. Well, how did they do it? Well, they acquired a number of picks. They made the right deal. So that's what the Wizards want to get out of this season. A couple of things: progress from players and helping identify which younger players that say, you know what, we think, he's part of our either short-term or long-term future. And you want to have, which we do have, we already have cap flexibility, but then you want to have more picks. You want to have more options, because that's going to increase, I think, your probability of success going forward in really having sustained success when you do have options. Because you know what? And this includes Orlando. You're not going to get every draft pick, I don't think, 100% right. It'd be nice if you did, but that's, drafting players is such a leap of faith in terms of you're trying to say, all right, well, this guy did this in Europe or here or where, and now how does it translate to the NBA game, which is in its own solar system? So, and this is why, and I hope people are enjoying our live posting show on home games and the Caesars Sportsbook, as we interact with fans that are there every night, and they get it. They understand that this is the season where, for lack of a better term, you can experiment. Does that mean more minutes for certain players at certain points? I don't have the answer to that right now, but I think all things are possible over the next 3 months. It's as we turn into, been doing this long enough. You get into January, man, it goes fast.
It does. I think it's a great point too about with Bilal, like the ability to be patient. Like, you have the luxury. You don't need to test him or push him any faster than you need, or that maybe even fans want. I know there's some prominent fans and bloggers, et cetera, who are like, I want to see Bilal doing this. And it's like, why? We're 30 games in or whatever we are. And another team that maybe on Friday, Dave, since we're playing them back to back, we can talk a little bit more how Cleveland's been built and if that could be a model as well. In the meantime, we let you prepare because your pregame show starts in, math, Dave. Why did I do this to myself? 18 minutes until you and Glenn get
18
going.
minutes.
Yeah.
There we go. No, we're looking forward to it. And listen, you mentioned Cleveland. This is a team that has, is putting a nice package together. But having said that, they're struggling right now because they have injuries to key players. So when we talk about all the ways you get successful going forward, you also have to stay healthy, and we know that all too well in Washington.
For sure. I mean, they were in many ways the Orlando last year, and then see where they are now. So we can talk more about that on Friday. In the meantime, Dave, we'll be back on your radio via the Radio Party, the Wizards Radio Network, coming up at 6:45. Thank you, sir, and we'll talk to you on Friday.
Sounds great. Great.
All right, that is Dave Johnson with us here on The Hoffman Show. When we get back, Jahan Dotson had some very interesting comments in the Commanders' locker room today. We will talk about them next, and then some funnier sound bites and real things real people said into real microphones. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Wrapping up here on this Wednesday. And typically this last segment, we just kind of get goofy and we get to real things and we tell you what's coming up on the show tomorrow. But occasionally something crosses our radar that is worth our attention, Anthony. And this from Jahan Dotson, he said. This from Jahan Dotson is worth our attention.
You're in between the lines. What do you think this team needs going forward next year to kind of get more wins, get over the hump?
I would say as far as players, just a sense of culture. Just we got to have a mindset in here that we want change. We can't just accept this type of stuff because this is really hard on a lot of people. And I know a lot of people come from winning backgrounds. So we got to bring that stuff in here. We can't accept anything but winning, honestly. And that starts with us players, no matter who the coaches are. It starts with us. We got to bring our best foot and make sure that we go out every Sunday and bring it.
When you say culture, is that on the players or do the coaches feed into that?
I feel like it's everyone, but, I feel like the best teams that you see in any sport are player-led. Your captains, they step up, and everyone really follows. Because when you're surrounded by guys who are hungry and want to win, it trickles down. It's a domino effect. So I feel like that's where we can start.
That clip is about 1:13 long, and I could do a 3-hour show on it. There's so much there that is interesting, and I think the two biggest points that come to mind are this. One, I actually think Jahan is wrong on the best teams being player-led. I think the best teams have the illusion of being player-led. The best teams have, from front office to coaching staff, a culture and a standard that brings in the right people that are of the same mindset. And thus it is so cohesive. And the players are the one that act on it the most, that it feels player-led. But I actually don't think, outside of the rare, truly phenomenal individual leaders, that the best organizations are player-led. That's why it's called leadership. Leadership starts at the top. Now, there's elements of servant leadership, which is something that I believe strongly in as a successful way to lead people. As in, the people with more power feel like they serve to exist, or they exist to serve the people with less power. Coaches are there to empower and serve their players versus the other way around. I think that it creates buy-in, it creates a cohesiveness, it creates all the things you need to be successful. But it actually, low-key, quietly starts at the top, as opposed to actually being something that the players have to implement from the bottom and overcome a lack of seriousness, a lack of focus, a lack of cohesion on a coaching staff, in a front office, etc. But it starts at the top, not just with the attitudes and the approaches and the professionalism and a standard, but with the actual recruitment of who those players are in the first place. And that is an area where I do not think this regime has succeeded. Straight up to it, they have not succeeded in that area. I think the other most interesting part of that comment is at the beginning when he talks about we have to be ready to want to change. And I wonder if that goes back to some of the preseason friction with Eric Bieniemy and members of this team and members of the staff that has since come out, that there are guys in the locker room and guys in the coaching offices that weren't particularly fond of the way that Eric Bieniemy did business. And I think that from the stuff that you hear, were there times that maybe EB needed to do better? Yes, and I'll expand on that in a second. But I do think there is also something to the credence that he knew what it took. Other people were comfortable. When he pushed them out of their comfort zone, they didn't like it very much. They weren't really ready to change. Now, the EB side that I would, if I was talking to Eric and being like, hey, dude, do you want to succeed in this league or not? Do you want to just do things your way or do you want to actually win? Is you have to meet people where they are. And as this is, again, like the player-led theme, just in coaching and in player-to-coach relationships, you have to be able to meet people where they are and bring them to where you want to go. In the NFL, you do not have the luxury because of contracts to just say, my way or the highway, get out. Maybe as a head coach you do. I mean, in many ways, that's what Ron did at the beginning. Ron came in and he flipped the entire roster. I think he flipped too many people, to be honest, in certain positions, certain people. There were probably guys that he kicked out that he shouldn't have because they're like, oh, it's not my guy. And it's like, yeah, but he's good. Get over it. Bring him onto your side. He can be helpful. And so I think that's where Eric erred, if you believe that he erred, is there were people that probably could have been more beneficial to the cause if there had been more collaboration. And eventually it's like, hey, this is the standard we need to get to, but I'm going to help you get there, versus like, you better meet me here right now. That's not a way to effectively create buy-in. And if you want to be a hard ass whatever and call it soft, I guarantee you if your boss did that to you, you wouldn't like it very much and you would say all kinds of terrible things about them because nobody likes it. It's very easy to sit on the sidelines and talk about other people that way when in reality you never accept that for yourself. And it's not because you're weak or soft either. It's because that's how human beings work. There's a lot of psychology and neurology that goes into this stuff. You can call me a nerd all you want, but like at the end of the day, we're all just a bunch of skin, bones, muscles, and ultimately brains and nerves that connect all of it. And we can't overcome that simple fact. And so you can either work with it or you can work against it. And I think there were probably there was a bad job on both sides of being willing to work with it as opposed to against it. There was a lack of openness, a closure of the window of tolerance, if you're going to go there on the neurology side. The window of tolerance wasn't big enough by the players and the coaches who didn't like EB. And EB probably wasn't willing to accept working with some of those people to open that up and ultimately bring them to where they needed to go. And I think all of that is reflected in Jahan Dotson there, who I think is incredibly bright, who I think is correct on basically everything he said, but also hasn't played particularly well himself this year. And I think he would, if followed up on that, he would say, yeah, I'm a part of the problem on certain levels of this. But I think this has happened with Terry when he's come in and he's looked at the culture and been like, we have the ultimate culture at Ohio State. This ain't it. Jahan coming from a Penn State program that won 10-plus games in a lot of the years he was there, looking around going like, this ain't it, or won a ton of games. I don't know Penn State's record, so nobody fact-check me on that. It's not the point. He won a lot more than he lost. And just, that ain't it. So I think John Allen has been fed up, and that's part of the reason he's like, maybe I just need to go somewhere else because they ain't up for that here. And so I think when we talk about what needs to happen, it's at the top getting people who implement that standard, who are about that life, if you will, in terms of what it truly takes to win, will put forth the resources, time, and effort to do that, and will bring together like-minded individuals, and that's how you change a culture. And so the only thing I disagree with Jahan is that it's player-led. It's not. It's player-participated in. But it is led by the people at the top who set it and who bring in the right people so that it feels authentically player-led because everyone's actually on the same page to begin with. That's the Jahan Dotson sound reaction take. Anthony, do we have time for real things?
Yeah, we got about 3 minutes and 15 seconds.
It's time for real things.
Real things.
We're not going to be sucked this year.
Real people.
5 and 11, not very good.
Said into real microphones.
You know, the culture is actually damn good.
All right, Ant, what do we got for real things today? I know I sent you some stuff, and then I did a bad job, and I don't have the rundown in front of me, so pick your favorite.
We got a plethora of things. We have Christian McCaffrey when he first met Travis Kelce.
Oh, that's a good story. So Christian McCaffrey was on a podcast. Anthony, if you can look up which podcast, or I can look it up real quick so we give them the proper credit. But it's kind of when he met Travis Kelce, although they never actually met. Here's the story.
Fun Travis Kelce story. I was in New York. I was by myself. I had taken the train. I get off in Grand Central train station. I'm sitting on the corner right there. I blend in well. Like, people think like, yo, what's it like being famous? I'm like, dude, honestly, I could throw this exact outfit on and like maybe a couple people, but like I blend in well. I'm standing on the side of the road. All of a sudden I hear C-Mac. I was like, what the hell is that? And that's when Travis was shooting SNL. So he's driving in a car and he's in the back of a black car and rolls the window and he's like, C-Mac, C-Mac. And I was like, yeah. And that was it. Ever since then, I was like, that's the coolest guy ever.
That's dope. Because y'all don't really know each other.
I don't know him at all. Like, I didn't know, I know him zero. Like, I knew him zero. I know him as much as I know, anyone else that I've only met once.
Yeah.
That sounds perfectly like Travis Kelce, by the way, courtesy of the B-Scar TV podcast with Brennan Scarlett. That was a great story.
That's a hell of a story. I wouldn't know what to do, though, if a guy just random. I would have to really know that that's Travis Kelce, because then I would just be utterly confused.
Unlike Christian McCaffrey, who's, like, especially if he's wearing, like, baggy clothes, because, like, if Christian McCaffrey were to walk by you in T-shirt and shorts, you'd be like, who is that athletic dude?
Yeah.
You, like, one of those where instantaneous, the way even if he's sitting on a corner, it's one thing. If Christian McCaffrey were to walk past you, you'd be like, that dude walks like an athlete. He's one of the most athletic freaks ever. But Travis Kelce doesn't exactly blend in. And especially when he's screaming with his head out of a black car driving in New York City.
Yeah.
On the week that he's hosting SNL.
I would love to meet Travis Kelce.
It sounds like a great time.
Yes.
Do we have time to play the other Christian McCaffrey one? If not, I can tell the story.
No, we don't.
Okay. Since we only have like 20 seconds left in the show. Basically, Christian McCaffrey was signing a bunch of autographs. They were slotting a bunch of hats by him. And someone tried to slip a USC, as in Southern Cal hat. If you remember, Christian McCaffrey went to Stanford. And he goes to sign. He's like, wait a sec. Hold on. You guys, you're not sliding this by me. And he wrote his stats from when he personally destroyed USC in the Pac-12 championship game in 2015, signed the hat, circled the SC, and put a line through it. Brilliant. We'll see you tomorrow on The Hoffman Show.